Hi, everyone. I am Michelle Vacanis, and I am the executive director of the Clatloose Tisdall Foundation. And in just a minute, I'm definitely a, um, a great advocate in the infertile community, and I had the pleasure of being on her podcast. And now we're going to talk to her. She's written a children's book
Hi.
called Hi, Allie.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Good. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
Okay, okay. But she's written a children's book called Work of Art, which is an incredible children's book looking at IVF and assisted reproductive technology and explaining that in a very easy way to kids. So thank you, Allie, for being with us. I'm so
Hi.
grateful to have you.
It's so good to see you again. I love talking to you on the podcast.
Yeah,
I was trying to remember when that was. I could look it up, but
yeah, that
it was so
feels like
awesome.
a very long time
Very
ago.
wonderful story, and I always love connecting. So thanks for doing this with
Yeah,
me. How's it
absolutely. Yeah. So I want to get into it. You wrote this, you've done all this work in the infertility community and really uh, speaking out loud about topics we don't talk
Yeah.
about. And so I always feel like a kindred spirit with you because I talk about
Mhm.
topics too, but nobody wants to talk about. Um,
Right.
but now you've transitioned a little bit, or done something new of writing a children's
Mhm.
book, which, by the way, just throwing that out there, is an awesome book. It's so sweet.
Thank you.
Um, my 3.5-year old, he doesn't quite totally get it, but he like loves the
Oh,
book and he just like is obsessed with it and goes to sleep with it sometimes.
oh
So,
my gosh.
um,
I
yeah.
love that. Thank you so much.
So,
I have to give
yeah, but
we can talk more about the book, but I have to give a shout out to my illustrator, Federico Bonificini, who's in Buenos Aires. And I mean, that's, half of it, was making it look so cute and beautiful. And he's such a talented illustrator. So I think that's a lot of the reason people are really liking it is like it's got really good illustrations.
yeah,
So
yeah,
just wanted,
definitely. And it just feels like, you're telling a story that kids can relate to, and then in throwing in some, kind of complex things that I think even adults are find difficult to wrap their minds around with
yeah.
IVF and, you know, assisted reproductive technologies. But I would just want to ask you, doing all of that you've already done, and we can talk more about that too, but what kind of inspired you to write this book?
So I realized actually, once I started talking about this book, I realized I did write my first children's book in first grade. I had, there was like a young author's book contest. So I wrote this book called The Bunny and the Beauty Contest, and that was my first children's book. Um, anyway, that's when I realized that I really loved writing. So, I have a journalism background and I've always been a writer and I've always loved telling people stories. In the back of my mind, it was just kind of on my list of things that I wanted to do. I always wanted to write a children's book. And I came up with the title a couple of years ago, Work of Art, because as everybody in this world knows, ART is assisted reproductive technology. And I always just thought that would be a cool title for a book. So one day, I sat down and I said, I just need to just do this. It's not going to happen if I don't just sit down and do it. So I did sit down, and the way that I came up with the story, which is basically me telling Sonny, my now 8-year old, how he was born, was that, I was talking to another mom on the playground and he kind of overheard me talking about it. This isn't exactly what happened in real life, but it's similar.
Mhm.
And then in the car on the way home was like, what did you say about Ivy? Did you say something about Ivy? And then I say, oh no, I was talking about IVF. And then, we kind of get into it that way. I wanted to make it really palatable for kids. As you'll know, if you see the book, we don't get super duper in the weeds about the science of it all. We talk about how he was born in a lab, made in a lab, and then grew in my belly. I was very conscious about not making it too complicated because I think that this is a really good, can be used as a good jumping off point. It kind of covers it's exactly the way that I did explain it to him. So, I knew that it would be effective in that way. So it's kind of like parents can read it, and then if they want to get deeper, or if they have older kids and they want to talk more about it, they can kind of use this as the jumping off point to open that door to the conversation. But yeah, the story just kind of, it's just one of those things where I just thought about how it did happen to me. And, it was really fun to work with Fed, my illustrator, because I was sending him photos and, of our real family and our real dog and our real house. And, he incorporated all that stuff in. So like the process of making it was really cool and collaborative. And he was just really open to whatever I wanted to do and was very quick. I'd send him something and then he'd send it back to me right away. Or I'd say, can you do these sunglasses? And, just specific things because I wanted it to ring as true and authentic as possible. The other fun thing is that there's all these little Easter eggs throughout the book too. So if people, know this world or like follow my story, there's like a little Infertile AF like hanging tag in our
I did
car.
see that.
We had
Yes,
put
I
like an
noticed
air
that one.
freshener, and I was like, oh, that would be a good spot to do
Right.
the logo. And then like in one illustration, I'm wearing a Worst Club Best Members shirt, which is our Fertility Rally, tagline. So things like that, which, people who I've been friends with, for the past 5 years in this community, like will email me and be like, I noticed that, like that was cute. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
kind of fun.
Yeah, I definitely noticed the air freshener. I
Yeah.
thought that was really a fun way. Yeah, and I think, I mean, the story is so like it just feels so natural of like how you're explaining it, and like you said, kind of just opening the door to that conversation. And I think that that's really important, right? We think about this like really big scary thing that, and I can speak to my personal experience with IVF of like, it feels daunting and feels very like confusing. And so how did you take this big thing that I as an adult couldn't totally wrap my mind around at first and explain it to a child? And the thing is, like, you don't have to explain the big, scary,
Mm-hmm.
full, detailed thing. You can just start laying that groundwork, and then they can share it. They can learn as much as they
Right.
want and as they grow. And so I really love it, and I thought it was like so beautiful. And I also have to say, my Chicago girl roots, forever and ever. I love that Sunny is a Michael Jordan fan because,
Yes.
I grew up in the age
Me
of the
too.
90s Bulls.
Oh my God, the
So,
Bulls when they were like winning all the
right.
championships.
And so I really do have to just say that as like an aside shout out that I really enjoyed
Yeah,
that as well.
totally.
That was part of it.
Yeah.
So, um,
Well, thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, talking, to your point about talking about hard things with kids, like I'd love to ask you about how you go about it as well. But, this was just like, my kids hear me. They've always, my daughter's 14 now and Sonny's 8. And I think they've always heard me around the house talk, recording my podcast
Mhm.
or on my fertility rally support group calls or talking to people like you. And, so fertility and infertility, the way that he was born, the way that Ever was born, my daughter, which is different because I didn't use assisted reproductive technology with her. We've always just been really open about their stories and how much we wanted them both. And, I think that that was another like impetus behind the book was like, I just want this to feel normal and for all kids to know that no matter how they got here, their parents wanted them, so badly, and they're very special, and everybody's unique in their own ways. So again, just normalizing the conversation, and it's cool because now this book's going into like libraries. Like my son's school librarian was like, "Can we get a copy?" So
That's so
drop
sweet.
one off over there. The PTA, for his school too, and then like the local libraries as well. So just to think that it's out there in the world and it exists and that it's on the shelves with all the other
Right.
books. I think, not, and it's not like in its own special section or anything like that. It's just another book. I think that's cool too, and making a lot of progress in terms of normalizing all this stuff.
Right. Right. No, and no, absolutely. And I think we have been very open as well
Yeah.
with our son from the very beginning. And so I think that's really a powerful thing because I think, it's so interesting, right? We have these like big adult topics, and sometimes when you explain it to a kid and you just break it down into their terms, they just accept it as is. And like they don't really like think that it's a big deal. And you're like, well, this is a big deal. And they just kind of take it and they go with
Mm-hmm.
it. Um, and I always think of I have a niece who's now in her mid 20s, but when I think she still must have been in high school, maybe college. My in-laws have a lake house, and so we were up there, and she had friends, and one of her male friends stopped by and said, talked to us for a few minutes, and then went outside, and all of a sudden, this what I thought was the same guy went down the stairs, and I was like, wait, hold on, how did you do this? And he said, oh, I'm one of three. And I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. And it was triplets.
Oh,
I
wow.
didn't realize that until that point. And then he said, and so just like offhandedly, like just natural, he just said, yeah, my mom used IVF and just continued on. And I remember thinking, wow, like, because I feel so often as, parents who have used these technologies, there's sort of this like, cover your mouth and sort of like use IVF,
Yeah.
like that you don't want to like share. And so I've always appreciated that you do this, but I think that doing this and saying like we're doing this with our kids to
Yeah.
normalize this and to create another generation that's just like it's a thing, right?
It's
And so it's as easy as saying, my mom is tall or whatever.
right.
And so I really,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's really great.
Yeah. Thanks. That's another part of the book where, Sonny says, his friend Jack is in the book and he's like, I don't know if Jack was born in a lab. And I was like, you never know. A lot of
Right.
kids were born that way. And actually it's foreshadowing because Jack was born in a lab, through IUI.
Yeah.
So that's going to be another book that, I'm going to write. And, this whole thing will be a series under the work of our umbrella, talking about all the different paths to building families through
Mhm.
ART.
Right.
So, I already have a couple books swirling around in my head, and Federico's already said he's on board, which is awesome. So, we'll focus on this one obviously now, but down the line, I definitely want to talk about all the other, ways and the
Right.
beautiful ways that people have created their families. So again, just wanting people to know they're not alone. There's so many different ways to do this, and everybody should feel special and loved in their own way.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think, really talking to that aspect and really normalizing that, how you come into the world might be presented in one way, that's how we all came into the world,
Right.
but that's not the case.
Yeah.
Um, and that doesn't make you weird. I think you
Right.
address that very easily. Like, wait, so am I weird? And it's like, no, you just have a different story,
Right.
and that's not only okay, that's beautiful that
Yeah.
you did that. So I think that's really an
Yeah.
important thing too.
For sure. And I will add too, because I've been doing a bunch of interviews about this, and people have been asking like, do you think everybody needs to tell their kids? And I'm keep saying like, absolutely not. I mean, I think to each his own. I've got some friends who have had their kids through IVF and haven't told them,
Mhm.
and the kids are older now, and I'm like, that's your
Right.
choice, and that's fine, and you'll process it however you want to process it. So I just want to throw out there like, no judgment from me. It's not like you must tell your children, but if it's right for you, then here's a good jumping off point, and here's
Right.
maybe a way to do it. I never want to say that somebody should live their life a certain
Right.
way at all,
No,
especially
absolutely.
so
For sure.
complicated and there's a lot of feelings and it's real heavy. So, if this isn't the way that you want to go and you don't want to tell your kids, that's your choice, and
Mhm.
that's okay too. And you
Right.
guys will figure out what's best for
Right.
you.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point, and thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's providing another avenue to start the conversation, but everyone has to do it in their
right.
own time and how they want to do it, it and including if that means not doing it at
Yeah.
all. That's a choice and that's an option, and all of these things have effects.
Mhm.
So however you want to choose to do it, I think that's great. I really liked it because I also thought I could see parents who don't know if they want to have that conversation, really taking your book and reading it and saying like, oh, maybe this is a good way to just like
Yeah.
plant a seed. And so I think that was particularly great too, is that,
Yeah.
it's a children's book, it's designed for children, but I think like parents and other loved ones could take a look at it and really
Right.
like say like, oh, okay, I get this. And, this is why
Right.
I believe in
Yeah.
this. So yeah.
Even for families that didn't go through, any sort of assisted reproductive technology, that's why I love the fact that it might be in a library and somebody might just pick it up, not really knowing what it is, and then be like, Mom, what's this? And just
Right.
learning about a different world, and so I hope that it goes just beyond our community and, becomes just like a very commonplace thing, because I think it's just so important to know about this stuff too. It
Right.
all
Yeah.
trickles down. And I always say the cliche of like knowledge is power. Like, the more kids know about fertility, the less they're going to find themselves in the situation that so many of us found ourselves in because we didn't know anything about our
Right.
fertility or sex education or any of that stuff. So I think that, planting the seeds when they're young and saying there's a lot of different ways to make a family is just a very cool bar to set.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking about that too, both reading the book and then, talking with you now is, I think that was one thing. I remember being on your podcast and thinking I was going to like dive into my story, and you sort of taking a step back and being like, what was your sex education like? What did you know about fertility before you even entered the
Yeah,
world of trying?
right.
Right. And it's like, oh yeah, that's true. And that was a real problem, right? Like I think the message I was always getting was, you have sex and you get pregnant,
Yeah,
right? And when all of a sudden that didn't work, it was a lot of feeling like something was wrong with me, and
totally.
that, and that's not true. That's not the case.
Yeah,
It's a different path that we
yeah.
were, you know, um,
Yeah, there's a
chosen
woman
to.
that's on my show a couple weeks ago named Julia Carroll. She's a solo mom by choice. And she came up with the term the banana condom generation, which I thought was so
Right.
brilliant.
Yeah.
Because I'm like,
That
yeah,
is.
that's what we
Yeah.
learned. We learned how to put a condom on a banana, but beyond that, we didn't learn much.
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think it's a really valid thing. And I do hope it's changing. And, like I said, my daughter's in high school now. I know for a fact that she and her friends know more than we did,
Right.
just about fertility in general
Mhm.
and options and, all that stuff. I think it's just good to have the agency over your own body and like know what's going on. Cause I was just embarrassingly clueless about my
Oh
fertility.
yeah,
I was
for
like, I
sure.
can have a baby whenever I want if I'm like in my
Right.
50s, whatever. Like I
Right.
really didn't
You
know
know. Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think when all those like stories of like, you hear that, what is it, Janet Jackson was in her 50s, and or
Totally.
that and you hear a lot of that, and so you start to feel like, okay, well then I'm not that old, so I
Right.
should. Does that mean something? Like why can't I at
Yes.
10 years younger, 15 years younger, whatever it may be, do that? And then you find out like, oh, there's a whole like world and a whole community of people who had the same experience,
Yeah.
and yeah, and
Yeah.
so yeah, I think it's very
Yeah.
true, and I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
So how can people find the book? How can people,
Show you guys
um,
right
you
here.
know,
I just did the New Jersey morning show, so I have it right here.
next?
Um, so this is the book. It's called Work of Art, and I self-published it. So it's available on my website, which is infertileafgroup.com. And there's a couple different versions. You can do a personalized version where I'll write you a little note, or you can do just, a regular version. What's been really cool, Michelle, too, is like sitting down and writing all these personalizations to everybody. Some of them have made me cry. There was one recently that was like, for our baby one day, we loved you before we even met you,
Oh,
with
you're gonna make
hope,
me
mom
cry,
and dad. And I was just like, oh, this is so
right?
cool that they bought this as their like faith purchase,
Right,
like
right.
someday. I just got the chills.
And that they got to
And
use the terms mom and dad, because I think that that's
yeah,
something too, especially, for those of us who their first foray out into trying to have a child was infertility, is, at some point you feel very much like I'm a parent, but nobody, I don't have a kid and
right.
nobody sees it. Or if you have had, history of loss
Yeah,
throughout the process, which is another part of the infertility, path that unfortunately some of us have to endure, uh, where it feels like I am technically a mother or I
yeah,
am technically a father, and I don't get to use those terms because the rest of the world doesn't do it. So I just like that, I especially found so powerful, is just being able to use the terms
yeah,
mom and dad, like how
exactly.
much meaning that has.
Exactly.
And yeah.
And to think that that book will be sitting, wherever on their shelf or in their home. And then when they, if they finally do have their baby, they can give it to them. It's that much more meaningful.
Right.
So that's been a really cool thing. And then also just hearing from people that are buying this as gifts, like for baby showers. And I have, I'm offering like bulk orders to like clinics and coaches and foundations and things that people are giving to like patients when they graduate as a gift,
Oh, that's
things
beautiful.
like that. So it's been really cool to see what how people are gifting it and buying like multiple copies like you did. You bought a couple.
Yep.
Thank you
Yep.
so
Yep. I
much. You've been so
Bought them for my son and then for my nephew. So
yeah.
yeah,
You've been so supportive of just everything with the rally and with this. So thank you for that. I want to ask you a question.
yeah, absolutely.
Tell me about, as your son gets older, how are you going to talk about all this stuff?
Yeah. So we have a couple of additional factors. We have loss, and so he
Right.
has an older sister that
Right.
we very much include in our family, and
Yes.
um, we use a bear to represent her, and
Yeah.
so that's really helpful. And we do talk about Colette a lot, and I mean, he's 3.5, so
Right.
on some days he totally gets it, and on other days he doesn't. And it's been interesting as he's started in preschool, and he sees other kids who do have siblings, and so like in particular, there's one girl in his class that he's very close with that has a younger sister that is in the same school. And so he sees that as her sister, and that's very different than his sister. And so, trying to figure that out and trying to explain, like, yes, that's her sister, but also you have a sister, it's just different looking. And so,
Right.
trying to talk through all of that and
Hmm.
really just give him the time and the space to figure out what works for him. And we will continue doing that, even in the years between Clad's death and Elliot's arrival. We have definitely, just always talked about Colette. She's part of our life, she's part of our family, and so we talk about her. So we'll just continue doing that, and we will obviously address it as different age points of like how we do it. And then the other, because right, we can't just have one complication. We got to throw all of them on. Is that we use a gestational carrier to bring Elliot home. So also having a little bit of that surrogacy conversation. One of the things I'm very grateful for is our carrier, who we met. We were launched through the agency, the fertility agency we went through. Um, she has become like part of the family, so she comes to like his birthday
I
parties and his things, and
love
she
that.
has 2 kids of her own, and so she brings the kids, and so like it's a really beautiful like piece, and I think that that is luckily like making it hopefully a little bit easier to understand is that he can see somebody and understand that that is part of our family now and what part she had in his arrival and his you know entrance into the world. And so I think that that's also really important, and that was intentional. That was part of the reason. I mean, one of the things we said was we really wanted somebody local, if possible, and that was partially to keep us connected during the pregnancy, but then it was also like hopefully long term that we could continue to keep that person in
Right.
our lives, because I think it's really, I mean, one of the difficult parts about Colette is, when he's seeing friends who have a sibling that they can see, right? It's very difficult to like also explain that as like you also have a sibling. You can't really see her, but she's here.
Right.
Um, and so I think, knowing that we have somebody we can say like, yes, mommy didn't carry you, but she did, and then she did this as an act of love. And so like think about how much, love you have is like not only do you have your parents and your grandparents and aunts, uncles and all of that, but you also have this woman who, had, carried you and loved you and continues to show up for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, beautiful. So
Yes.
yeah, I mean, we're just very, I think we're very open about
Yeah.
it. Everyone in our world has, kind of gotten on board, and those who can't, we really just have had to sort of, release them a little bit from our world,
Yeah.
because I think it's really important that everybody, support it and really do that as well. And
Completely.
yeah,
I love
yeah,
that you're, talking about Colette and she's such a big part of your family. And, can I ask about the foundation
yeah,
too? Like, what are you, for people who might not
yeah,
know, I'm sure your followers do, but if people are coming from my
yeah,
page and don't know, can you tell us a little
absolutely.
bit about what it
Sure,
is and
sure,
how people
sure.
can?
Um, So we are a nonprofit, and our mission is to improve outcomes of pregnancy, childbirth, prematurity, and infancy, and aid in the grieving process. And we do that through financial assistance, education, and advocacy. Our financial assistance program is really like our baby. That was really what started this path. So we do financial assistance to families affected by high-risk pregnancy or pregnancy that develops some sort of complication,
Hmm.
NICU stays, and loss. And so we do that as those are kind of the three stages of Colette's
Yeah.
life. Um, and so we officially have Alaska. That was our holdout state. So we have now helped families in 50 states, and given away, we've helped over 2,100 families. We've given away over 1.4 million in
Yes.
financial grants, and just really trying to remove barriers
Yeah.
to care and access, and trying to get more equality in healthcare and in parenting and in the journey. And yeah, it's been really
Wow.
amazing. We're a little over
Yeah.
5 years. We started in September of 2018. And so it's been really amazing to just see the growth and to see the real need out there, right?
Right.
This is something that, we're just not talking about enough. We're just not
Right.
supporting enough. And so, yeah, so it's been really great
Yeah.
to do that. So,
I love it. I love everything that you guys are doing, and it's so important. And you're really helping so many people. So,
yeah.
so much love for that. Um, so maybe we'll have to talk book down the line. Maybe there's a collab there.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I always say that that's like on my list. Like I
Yeah.
always talk about writing a book. And so like when you said I just sat down and write it, I was like, maybe that's what I just have to do. I just have to like
It's
do
yeah.
it and,
The
and,
hardest
and
part
do
is
it.
the blank page, but once you get
Right.
going, it's just as my friend Sonia says, just do that shitty first
Right.
draft, just like get it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so
Yeah.
much for
Thank
this.
you. And so
Yeah. So
my
this is
final
the
things are buy this book, especially if you yourself have used any assisted reproductive technology. And for your kids, I think that's so valuable. But, like Ali said, I think it's also just valuable that we're learning about, differences in families and different ways of entering the world and all of that. And so buy the book. We are a nonprofit, I will say. So if you can donate, we would love it. And all of
yeah,
our donations go straight to the financial assistance
it's
program.
awesome.
And so it will go straight to families who really need it.
That's
And
so cool.
so I will share those links too as well. But
And
thank
we'll
you so
talk.
much, Ellen.
Yeah, thank you. Let's talk more offline about how we can help each other out more and work together too. Because I love everything you're doing, and I
Sounds
love
great.
working with you. You're such a
Sounds great.
wonderful
Oh,
person.
you too. I
All right.
always
I
appreciate it.
feel
So
that too.
thank you.
Thanks, everybody. All right. I'll
Bye
talk to you
bye.
soon. Bye.